There is a question every solo founder eventually asks themselves, usually late at night staring at an ad account. How much is one customer actually worth to me? Not what they paid last month, but across the whole time they stick around. There is a number built specifically to answer that, customer lifetime value, and it is one of the most useful things you can calculate for a small subscription business, and also one of the easiest numbers to quietly fool yourself with. Today I want to show you how to work it out honestly, with real arithmetic, and where it tends to lie to people who are not careful with it. I calculate this number for my own small businesses, mostly so I know how much I can actually afford to spend winning a new customer without losing money on the deal. I am not handing you a magic formula that turns guesswork into certainty, because nothing here removes the guesswork entirely. What I can give you is the plain version of how this works, a worked example with real numbers, and an honest list of the ways people, myself included, have gotten this wrong. What customer lifetime value actually is. Customer lifetime value, usually shortened to KLV or LTV, is an estimate of the total revenue, or the total profit, one customer brings you over the entire time they stay with you. It is not what they paid you this month. It is the whole relationship added up, projected forward, using what you already know about how long customers typically stick around. The entire point of the number is to answer a single practical question. Given what a customer is worth over time, how much am I allowed to spend to acquire one? The simple formula. The most common version of the formula is refreshingly simple. Take the average revenue per customer per month and divide it by your monthly churn rate. Dividing by churn works because churn rate is roughly the inverse of how many months a customer sticks around on average. If 5% of customers leave every month, the average customer sticks around for about 20 months, 1 divided by 5%. Multiply that average monthly revenue by that expected lifespan and you have a rough QV. A worked example. Let's put numbers on it. Say your average customer pays you $40 a month and your monthly churn rate is 5%. 1 divided by 5% gives you an expected lifespan of 20 months. $40 times 20 months gives you a customer lifetime value of $800. That is the number that should be sitting in the back of your mind every time you decide how much to spend on an ad, a cold email campaign, or an afternoon of outreach to win one new customer. The trap of estimating lifespan too early. Here is where young businesses get into trouble. That 20-month lifespan estimate assumes you actually have enough history to know your churn rate with any confidence. If you launched 3 months ago and none of your handful of customers have left yet, your measured churn rate is 0, which would imply an infinite lifespan and an infinite KLV, which is obviously nonsense. With little history, treat any KLV number as a rough guess dressed up in decimal points, not a fact. It will get more trustworthy every month you accumulate real data on who actually stays and who actually leaves. Margin adjusted versus revenue only. The version of the formula I walked through uses raw revenue, but revenue is not the same as what you actually keep. If delivering your product or service costs you money, hosting, payment processing fees, support time, materials, then the honest version of KLV multiplies by your gross margin, not your top-line revenue. A customer paying $40 a month on a product with 70% margin is really worth $28 a month to you in profit terms, not the full 40. Skipping this adjustment is one of the fastest ways to overestimate how much you can afford to spend acquiring someone. The KLV to CAC ratio. Here is the actual reason most people bother computing KLV at all. It is almost never useful sitting alone. It becomes useful the moment you compare it against CAC, your customer acquisition cost, what you actually spend in ads, tools, or your own time valued honestly to win one new customer. A commonly cited healthy ratio is roughly 3 to 1, KCV at least 3 times your CAC, though that guideline came from a specific corner of the software industry and should not be treated as gospel for every kind of business. What actually matters is that the ratio comfortably covers your margin, your costs, and leaves room for the estimate being wrong, because it usually is, at least a little. The payback period, a companion number. There is a companion number worth calculating alongside the KLV to CAC ratio called the payback period. It asks a narrower, more immediate question, not how much is a customer worth over their whole life, but how many months of their revenue does it take just to earn back what you spent acquiring them in the first place? If a customer costs you $120 to acquire and pays you $40 a month in margin, it takes 3 months of them staying before you have simply broken even, before any of the relationship counts as actual profit. A healthy KLV to CAC ratio calculated over a long expected lifespan can still hide a dangerously long payback period, and a long payback period matters a great deal if your cash is tight, because you are floating the cost of every new customer for months before you see any of it back. I would rather have a shorter payback period and a slightly lower overall KLV than the reverse, especially as a solo operator without a deep cash reserve sitting behind me. Averages hide a skewed customer base. A quiet danger in any average is that it can describe nobody in particular. If you have one customer paying you $500 a month and 20 paying you $15 a month, the average revenue per customer sits somewhere in between, and a KLV built on that average does not really describe either group honestly. A customer base is rarely one uniform crowd. It is usually a small number of larger accounts and a long tail of smaller ones, and blending them into a single KLV number can send you chasing the wrong kind of customer entirely. Segmenting by channel or plan. The fix for that blending problem is to segment. Compute KLV separately for customers who came from different channels, a referral versus a cold ad versus organic search, because customers who arrive through different doors often behave very differently once they are in. Do the same across plan tiers if you offer more than one. You will often find one channel or tier quietly worth 2 or 3 times another, and that difference should directly change where you spend your limited time and money. Say your paid ad customers have a KLV of $300, but your referral customers who trust you more from the start and stick around roughly 3 times as long have a KLV of $900. Blending those into one overall figure would badly understate how valuable your referral channel actually is, and could lead you to underinvest in the very channel quietly carrying your best customers. CLV also has something useful to say about pricing, a decision many solopreneurs make once and then never revisit. If your KLV comfortably clears your CAC with room to spare, that is not necessarily a sign to spend more on acquisition. It can just as easily be a sign your price is lower than it needs to be. Raising price slightly and watching whether churn moves is a far more grounded way to test pricing than guessing, because you can watch the actual effect on KLV itself in both directions rather than debating it in the abstract. The feedback loop with your product. CLV is not a fixed fact about your business. It moves as your product and onboarding improve. Shorten the time it takes a new customer to reach their first real win, and you often extend how long they stick around, which raises CLV directly through the churn side of the formula. This is one of the more encouraging parts of the whole exercise. CLV is not just a number you measure. It is a number you can deliberately move by making the actual experience of being your customer better. Common mistakes. A handful of mistakes show up constantly. Treating a young business's early thin churn history as if it were a stable long-term rate, using revenue instead of margin, and quietly overestimating how much you can spend to acquire someone. Calculating KLV once and never updating it as your business and your customers change. Ignoring the payback period entirely and only looking at the long-run ratio, which can leave you technically profitable on paper while quietly starved of cash every single month. And the most tempting one, using an optimistic KLV number to justify acquisition spending you cannot actually sustain if the estimate turns out wrong, which it sometimes will. What this number cannot tell you. KLV is a forecast built out of the past, and forecasts built out of the past assume the future behaves roughly like it. A new competitor, a price change, or a shift in what your customers actually need can break that assumption without warning. Treat KLV as a reasonable planning boundary, not a guarantee stamped on every future customer you win. How to actually use it? Practically, I use KLV as a ceiling, not a target. It tells me the most I am willing to spend acquiring a customer, with a healthy margin of safety underneath it, not the number I am trying to hit exactly. Recalculate it every few months as your churn and pricing settle. Segment it the moment you have enough customers in more than one channel to make that meaningful, and never let a single optimistic estimate talk you into spending more than your actual cash flow can absorb. Write down the assumptions behind the number 2, your churn rate, your margin, your average revenue, so that when reality drifts from the estimate, you can see exactly which assumption broke instead of throwing out the whole exercise. If this made customer lifetime value feel like a usable number instead of a scary acronym, that is exactly the goal. Every one of these explainers lives in writing at dataresearchanalysiscollection.com, the whole metric library in plain English, so you can walk through the formula again with your own numbers. No hype, no promises about your results. Just the arithmetic explained clearly enough that you can make your own call. So to recap, Calevi estimates the total value a customer brings you over their whole relationship with your business. Usually average revenue divided by churn rate, adjusted for margin if you want the honest version. It only becomes genuinely useful once you compare it against what it actually costs you to acquire a customer. And it hides real differences between customer segments if you only ever look at the blended average. Use it as a spending ceiling. Keep it updated. And remember, it is a forecast built on the past, not a promise about the future. Next time I want to walk through cohort analysis, the method that lets you actually see whether your business is getting better or worse over time instead of guessing. I will see you in the next one.